City of Marietta turned 237 today, and the Marietta chapter of the Sons of the American Revolution held an educational program. According to Vice President of the Marietta Sons of the American Revolution, Gene Yost, the program is more on the educational side, geared for students. The program primarily consisted of a telling of the story of how the Marietta pioneers found their way to the first settlement of the Northwest Territory in 1788. Yost said there were students from the Washington County Career Center and St. Mary's Catholic School at the event. Yost adds that knowing history allows you to know more about what happens today.
You know the history of the community. You understand much more about what goes on today. The history, and most of these students may have as many as 20 or 30 of the patriots in their family tree.
Yost adds that in the coming months, they have plenty of events scheduled to start the celebration of America's 250th anniversary next year.